We go. All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for Finding Your Signature Style. And can I just say thank you for being brave? Signing up for this class is a big commitment. Now, maybe you don't realize that yet, but it is. We're going to be spending a lot of time in the next 5 hours over 2 sessions, diving deep into our handwriting. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and mute yourself unless you have a timely, relevant question, just so that we can have a nice, clean recording. And if I do mute you, please don't take it personally. I just want to make sure that it's nice and clean. Also, I want to make sure that you do feel comfortable unmuting. So again, if you have a timely, relevant question, don't hold back. If you have a burning question, there will be time before the break where I'm going to prompt you to share some of your questions so that I can see some of your learning intentions. And again, at the end, to ensure that you are feeling whole. So, what is our purpose today? Well, it's to find your signature style. And what's our process? We're going to wrestle your handwriting to the ground, put it in a chokehold until it hollers uncle. No, I'm just kidding. But I am going to walk you through a series of exercises that I've learned and further developed to help you find unique variations and lettering that's going to allow you to find your signature style, but also to improve your handwriting, identify your natural tendencies and style, and refine your styles by embracing what works and what we aspire to. So let me give you some context and as to the why here. In 2014, I suffered from an identity crisis due to not being able to confidently identify my style of handwriting. I'd been a graphic recorder for a few years and my handwriting was good, but I was about to go professional. Now, I'd already been making money as a visual practitioner and a graphic recorder, but I was joining a team and I had no distinct style that I really felt good about. And I tried a variety of tools and I was satisfied with my sketch note handwriting. That's the smaller handwriting. But when I went big on the wall, my letters were rushed, wonky, and I didn't feel good about them. Then, after a few calligraphy classes, believe it or not, I felt even worse. Sure, I learned foundational hand from Herman A. Miller, who helped me with my lowercase, also known as minuscules, and learning Roman hand from Sheila Waters helped me with my uppercase, also known as majuscules. But that was in form only. And when I sped up, like many of you visual practitioners, my letter forms fell apart. And many of you calligraphers probably feel that way when you write really fast. Then I took a pointed pen class, and that left me even more dissatisfied because it was completely useless for graphic recording, and I didn't like the aesthetic for my creative projects. So, what does this all mean? You all know I've taken calligraphy classes, and I've now taken everything I've learned and I'm breaking it down so that I can give you sort of the express highway to how to figure these things out quickly. Now, there were parts of my lettering that I liked, but I didn't have the skills or the know how to make it stylized and work at the speed when making fast lists, writing letters or thank you notes, or even at my job. So, how did I cross that chasm? Well, as many of you can identify with, it took some time, practice, but it really took staying curious to find and create exercises for myself to hone my lettering to my liking and to create a curriculum that provides you with those practical steps to work with your handwriting in meaningful ways. So we have a very, very diverse group of people today. So I want you to listen carefully as I have very specific assignment for each one of you. Now, some of you are visual practitioners. That means you may be a graphic recorder, you may be a facilitator, or use whiteboard markers or flip overs in your work. I just want to acknowledge that you have exceptional speed and skills when it comes to listening, drawing, and writing. Now, in this session, I'm going to ask you to really slow down in a pace that you probably aren't comfortable with and really look at the letters you're making. Now, if you're a visual practitioner, I would love for you to type the letter V in the chat. That kind of helps me know who are the visual practitioners in the room. Now, if you are a calligrapher who's taken classes where you focus on letter forms, techniques, or the use of tools, I'm going to ask you to speed up a little bit In fact, it might seem really fast. And I'm going to ask you to stay open to what's emerging. Really pay attention. Now, if you're a calligrapher, go ahead and type the letter C in the chat so I know how many calligraphers we have in the room. I know we have a couple there. And if you're both, that's fine. You can type that too. Now, if you're an artist, a DIYer, someone who wants to use letters in their everyday applications and creative projects, you're a creative thinker and you may or may not like to follow rules. So I'm going to ask you to consider what I offer and then diverge or break the rules as you feel comfortable and necessary to meet your intended purpose. So if you're an artist or if you're going to use your lettering in creative projects, then go ahead and type the letter A. So we know how many artists we have in the room. That also lets me know how many divergent thinkers we have in the room too. And that's great. All right. So if you don't identify with any of these, that's totally fine. Go ahead and type O in the chat. And don't question who you are. I'm not questioning who you are. Simply stay curious and practice with a discerning eye. And I want you all to know that you all belong here. So, one of the things you can do if you ever get confused, because there are going to be times where you're focused so much on your writing, you're focused on what's happening on the paper. I want you to check in with your body. And if you get too confused, like you might be overthinking it a little bit, just notice if it's happening. Check in with your body. You have a built in muscle memory that you've been relying on for years. So I want you to trust that because it's going to serve you well. Now, speaking of trust, trust the process. I love and loathe this term, mainly because I don't want to assume that you will trust me. For some of you, we've just met, and some of you may have great doubt about your handwriting abilities, but some of you are ready. In fact, let me take a look. Yep, I can tell by the way you are on camera, your shoulders, how you're leaning into it, how you're sitting, even if you have resting thinking face. I know that you are ready. Okay. So I'd like to invite everyone to turn on your camera to create a sense of community, but also know that I understand if you're eating, taking care of someone, don't have the bandwidth, or having a bad hair day, but we will be using breakout rooms. So I'd love for you to turn on your cameras then. And we're going to be using Padlet in these 2 sessions. When it comes to breakout rooms, I'll put you in groups of say 2 to 3. And if you're too shy, or you don't if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's okay. You're welcome to leave the room immediately and you'll be brought back into plenary where we can work quietly. And when it comes to posting on Padlet, I'll walk you through the steps to post. And if for some reason this goes too fast or you're having trouble posting during our class times, no worries. You can post in Padlet anytime between the sessions. All right. I love that some of you are a bit of all of them and identify that way. Thank you, Ludi. Now, you can also know that if there's anything you want to post to Padlet and you just can't get it up there, feel free to email me. I'll post it for you. No worries. I just need to know if you want to post anonymously or not. I don't want you to let the technology get in the way of you participating. So I want you to know that all of the posts to Padlet can be anonymous if you wish. You don't have to own Padlet. You don't have to log in. You're just going to use the link that I give you or the QR code that I put up on the screen. Now, can we all agree? I'm going to go to my gallery view here for just a moment, just so I can see all of you. Can we all agree that we create a Padlet that is a safe space for all of us so that we can be brave? Meaning we're not going to share it with anybody. We're not going to show it to anyone. All right, good. Love seeing all those thumbs and hands up. Thank you for that, because I want us to all be in a place where we can be brave. All right. Let's get ready. So it's kind of going to be like this over the next 5 hours. Let me go back to that. Trust the process. You're going to start out and you're going to be like, what's happening? I'm nervous. You might be feeling a little anxious, like you're getting ready to put pen to paper. And then we're going to get to a point, probably sometime today or next week, where you're going to say, oh, I see where we're going. I'm feeling good about this. Even though I'm leading you through this process, you do have your handouts, but even though I'm leading you through this process, you might start seeing, okay, I can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden, things are going to go really fast. You're going to feel like, oh, time is running out. And you're going to be like, what are we doing here? This is going too fast. Or it could be kind of scary if you get a little lost. And that's okay, because at the end of these 5 hours, you're going to be like, ooh, okay, that was okay. Or I'm ready to do it again. All right. So just know that it might feel like a bit of a roller coaster at some parts of that, but that's a-okay. So what are you going to need? Let me go ahead and share my screen so that you can see what we need to have on hand. And I'm going to grab this list and put it in the chat just in case, because there's lots to look at here. And I want to make sure that you see this. Also, remember that in the chat, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat. I just ask that you put 3 question marks in front of your question, like what I've done here, or feel free to unmute because that's a lot faster than typing. So what do I want you to have on hand? Well, I'd love for you to have a favorite mark making tool. I love the pencil. I love the sketch one, which is just a monoliner. So many of you may have something like this on hand. That's fine. And I also want to be writing. I'll probably be doing a majority of my writing with the fine one. It's got a round nib on it, outliner. Let me make sure I'm in focus here. By Neuland, and I'm using Neuland products because that's what I use every day. You don't have to use these products. I just want you to find probably a monoline, but it could be something else that you love. It's got to be fast, so no dip pins in this class, calligraphers, because I want you to be able to write quickly. And then eventually we'll get to a tool that maybe isn't as comfortable, but you don't need this for this session. We'll do it in the next session. I just choosing a brush nib. You're also going to want paper that goes well with the tool that you're writing with. Now, I'm using the practice pad by Neuland. I also like graph paper, grid paper, any kind of paper that has lines might feel a little bit more comfortable to you. But if you're comfortable with just writing with no lines, that's okay. You're going to want to have the handouts, and you don't have to print them. I didn't leave a whole lot of room on here. There's a little bit of room, but you might want to have some extra paper on hand as well. But you can also just have this on your screen and just refer to it. And I'm sorry that I did not number these pages. Oops. If you want to number them, now is a great time to do so. If they came out of your printer in order, I'm hoping mine did. Okay. So you might want to number those but you'll be able to see when I'm working on them, what page I'm on. You'll want to have some kind of font exemplar. Now, this was something I asked you to either have on screen or print out, and it needs to be some kind of a font that's not a handwriting font, okay? So this is the one that I like, the one that I chose is called Formata, and you don't have to choose this one, Condensed Light. And Formata has been a lettering font that I have used in my brand, on everything that I do for probably over 15, 20 years. So this is one of my favorite fonts. And I'm asking you to use one that's not handwriting like, because I don't want you to copy this. We're looking for attributes in this. So we'll get into this a little bit later. The next thing I want you to have is have some kind of a pangram. We do have pangrams that you can download at Pangram Love, and it's at the bottom of the page. I'll put that in the, it's pangramlove.com. I'll put that in the chat so that you have it. You don't have to use this pangram. You can also just use a quick brown fox, or the quick brown fox jumps over a lazy dog. So that's really all you need is a pangram, because a pangram is an alphabet sentence, meaning it includes every letter of the alphabet. And then I'm going to need you to have an open and curious mindset with a keen observant and discerning eye. So what I mean by that is I really want you to be open to what's going to come up. And if you have a picture of your original baseline pangram, that's great. If not, we're going to make one shortly. All right, I'm going to do a couple of things, and then, but before we jump in, I want to ask, does anyone have any questions whatsoever right now? I'm going to have an example. We'll have time in a minute to also type them in the chat, but just want to see if anybody has anything burning. Oh, yeah, that's fine. So, Linda, it doesn't matter how you have that exemplar. It can be typed up on your screen. You can type it yourself. I just did a screenshot from something I found online. All right, so this first page is really your pre-work, the supply list, the tips. Now, if you haven't already watched Anatomy of a Letter, and that's fine. If you already know the anatomy of the letter, that's great. This is mainly for those of you who might be new to my classes, and you might just want to make sure that you understand what I mean when I say the stem, when I talk about lobes, counter spaces, legs, and serifs, and there's all kinds of other lettering anatomy. For instance, if this is my baseline and this is my X height, then that means an X is going to live within there. But if I have an ascender line, and I'm writing fast, and I write the letter D, then this part is the ascender. And if I have a descender line, if I'm talking about descenders, then what that means is if I write something like a G, this part of the letter is going to be hit the descender line. So this is the kind of vocabulary that I'm going to be talking about so we know how our letters live within relationship to our practice lines if you're using them, not totally necessary. All right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write a new baseline, which means the pangram that we're writing can be any pangram. I'm going to choose a new one just so that I get very used to writing these letters that are next to each other. So I'm just going to grab one from my pangram, and I'd love for you to join me. This isn't a demo class. You're going to be writing right along with me. So go ahead and get comfortable, grab your favorite mark making tool, and go ahead and write your pangram. Okay. Do it at a careful, but also somewhat fast speed that you would use for your handwriting. We're not looking for your best work, but do try to make it legible if possible. Maybe that's one of your goals, is to make it legible. And again, you don't have to copy me. Choose your own pangram and go for it.
Heather, does it make a difference if we typically write in all caps? I see you're using both.
Yeah, I'm doing lowercase. That's fine. If you do all caps, that's fine too. I'll give you another minute or so to finish up your pangram. Yeah, it can be uppercase, lowercase, whatever, but we are going to talk about the difference in those two. And we're probably going to, well, it's totally up to you what you want to focus on in this class. An excellent question, by the way. I appreciate hearing that. Okay, just a quick look around the room. Raise your hand if you need more time, your physical hand if you need more time. Looks like you're all doing pretty good. That's super. All right, so I did put the link in the chat to the Padlet. I'm also going to put the instructions in the chat so that you have that. And this is instructions for posting from your phone. I'm also going to walk you through it. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec and we're going to go right to that Padlet so that you can see it. Actually, no, my apologies. I am going to share with you the QR code so that you have it. So here's how this works. This is where, ooh, and I forgot to tell you, you're going to want to have your phone on hand. I think I put that in the chat. So you're going to take your phone and you're going to turn on your camera app. Your camera app. Now, if you are on an Android, chances are this may not work. And if it doesn't work, no worries. You can just use the link that I put in the chat, take a picture, and then send it to your computer. But you're going to take your app on your phone, you're going to point it to the QR code that you're seeing on your screen from me. Let me see if I can get it here. And what should pop up is it might say padlet.com, or it might have a little frame around it, or something might come down. It depends on what your operating system is. Go ahead and touch that. You're not taking a picture, just touch it. And then what will happen is Padlet will show up on your phone. After that, there's a little plus button, pink plus button. You're going to touch that and you're going to choose the camera icon and take a picture of what you just wrote. And as long as it's facing up, meaning it's not sideways, if it's sideways, reposition your camera and go ahead and use that photo. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear your Android worked. Not all of them do. That might be, they might have upgraded it. Now, here is where the post is there, and you can either just hit publish and that's fine. You can also at the top where it says subject, you might want to type baseline. And underneath, if you want to, where it says add a caption, you can type your name if you want to. You can, or you can be totally anonymous. And in the comments, just for practice, if you want, you can type what you were writing with.
Hey, Heather,
Yeah.
is this a new comment or should we be posting it as, is it a new post, Pat? I'm not sure the terminology in Padlet, or
Yeah.
are we commenting on something that's already there?
No, this is a new post on Padlet. So you are publishing your
We're
own
making
thing.
lots of new things. Got it.
Yes, we're making a whole gallery. We're going to have, let's see, we got
Awesome.
24 people. So for those of you who can and want to share, we should have 24 new posts. They're going to pop up really fast.
Heather, I'm on an Android and I've gotten to the proper place, but I don't have any pink plus sign in order to take a picture. Can you give me some guidance?
Yeah. So if you have, if let's see, so when you say you've gotten to the proper place, you pointed the QR code.
Yeah, I'm on the site and I have visuals. I just don't have the ability. Oh, never mind. I do. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So this is a great example. Thank you so much, Susan, for that learning example. So this is about staying curious. So you might not see it right off the bat, but it's there. Good. We have some that are a little sideways. That's okay. Just know that you can always, sometimes it might be because your phone is set to horizontal or it's set to vertical, but you can always also change that before you upload it, but that's okay. You can't change it after you upload it, but this is great. Excellent job, everyone.
I also have a question, Heather.
Yeah.
Where it says publish up in the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side, there's a close button and then there's a white, it says white with a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what, do I need to do anything with white? Do I need
Nope.
to click on
You
it?
can,
Okay.
nope, you can go ahead and click publish. Now,
Okay.
where that says white, it will allow you to change the color of your post. So what I'm going to do now is hopefully all of you have that QR code. If you don't, I can also post it in the chat. And then pretty soon I am going to share the screen so we can all look together. Great. So I'm just going to put this QR code in the chat in case you need it. And then I'm going to share our Padlet on our screen. So if for some reason, if you have a couple of different windows up, this might get a little confusing. Just know that you can't add to the screen that I'm sharing. It's not interactive there. So if you see that little plus button, in the lower right of my screen. That's not for you to click. That's the shared screen. All right. So what we're looking at, this is the Padlet. At the very top, it's telling us that there's a whole bunch of people in the room. That's super. So if you come in outside of class, which you're welcome to, and look around, you're welcome to comment, like, you just push the button, the little heart there to like other people's. You can click on, let's see, let me just grab one here. I'm going to pick on Brandy because she's my friend and I think she could take it. So here I can choose to add a comment. Now my little face is showing up because this is my Padlet. I'm signed into Padlet. So just know that's the case. Yours won't show up unless for some reason you're signed in. And if you want to stay anonymous, you would just sign out and then just use that link to get back in. But here, if you click on any one of these pictures, it will make it bigger so you can see it. And we're going to want to do that when we go out into breakout rooms. You're going to find your own, and then you can all share and show each other what you're. I want you all to get into Padlet so you can look and share. And it looks like she's saying I had too many options from Heather's Pangram Day to choose from. That's great. Some of you might even write your own pangrams. So I'm going to look at this closely, and I'm going to see a couple of things here. And I'm going to write a couple of things that I like. And we're going to use appreciative inquiry, an appreciative approach, a positive approach when we're giving feedback, because that's going to help us keep a brave space. So under that comment, I love your, I'm going to say letter A. That's the way I make my letter A. And I notice that some of your letters join and some don't. I would say I am curious if that, oops, I hit the return key instead. So I'm going to edit my comment. Curious if that is about speed or, and we can have a conversation here. If she wants to answer me, that's fine. But I really am interested in how some of these letters, like her E and her I, her O and her N, her T and her Y, her R and her E, that's a really interesting thing that I'm noticing. And the only reason why I'm doing that is to help her see what I see, because this is like kind of getting a fresh view or feedback from other people. So I just wanted, wow, you all did really great. Let's see how many we have here. We have 6, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oops, there's more coming in. Well, we have over 20. I'm going to call that good. If anybody needs help putting theirs up that couldn't put it up and wanted to, let me know. You can let me know in the chat if you need to, and you can always email me. Okay, you just get a black screen when you click on the photo in Padlet. Okay, I would want. Joe, are you pointing your camera to the actual picture or the actual thing that you just wrote?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to email me your image if you would. So if anybody's having trouble, you're always welcome to email me, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. And to email, when you email it to me, all I do is open up my email and drag it over. So if you need me to put your name on it, I'm happy to do that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. And here's what I want to have happen next. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. And I want you to make sure that you have your that you are in Padlet on your computer, so that when you go to share your screen, you can share it with other people. So that's going to be a key thing. And let me get all
That's
my
going to
other.
be a thing for me. I'm on my iPad in the Zoom, but
Ah.
I have Padlet on my phone.
Okay.
And
So
if I go to the Padlet, then I'm losing
okay.
the Zoom, right?
It's okay.
Yeah.
So some of you are on a tablet or your phone or something else and you're watching this. If someone in your group is on a laptop and it's very easy for them to share,
Mhm.
then let's assign one person to like go find that one. It's
That's
just
great.
good if someone's anonymous. But if you don't have time for everyone to share, I completely understand. I just want to make sure that we've got that. And remember, if you're like, this is kind of scary and you want to come back to the room, that's fine. You're welcome to come back to the room as well. Meaning you can leave and just join me back in plenary. Okay, so let me give you our next instructions because you're going to meet in groups. And what I want you to do is find your own, if you're willing to share that. And you're going to make it big like I did. You're going to click it. You can share your screen or you can just tell people where to find it. And then I want you to talk about, and I'll put this in the chat. I want you to talk about what you like, what you notice and like about the other person's handwriting. Are any specific letters standing out? Can you focus on the positive aspects of lettering, whether it's you presenting or giving feedback to others? So if you're showing your work and you're like, I don't like my letter R, say, here's what I do like about the letters that I did write. And if you see something that's really stands out with someone else's, say what you like about it, say what stands out and why you like it. Because sometimes standing out may or may not be a good thing, but do definitely share what you like about it so people have it. All right. Any questions before we go into the breakout room? Going to give you 5 minutes. Great. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. How was that? Love for you to unmute. Tell us. I see a lot of thumbs up.
Yeah, I liked it.
Fun.
It was nice to have kind of a one-on-one conversation.
Good.
And also hard to keep focusing on the good stuff and not
Yeah.
go over the things you don't like.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is good practice for you then. Very
Yes.
good.
I thought it was interesting in that the two other people I shared the room with, all of our writing is vertical. I expected a lot of people to write in a slant. I just thought it was me because I was left-handed that I wrote vertically, but we all kind of did that. I thought that was kind of cool.
Good. Good. Anyone else? Okay. I know that I've enjoyed people sending me examples of their work over the years, and I'm always surprised because it's like, oh, look at what they've created. And it's nice to see someone else's handwriting for a change and to also look for some of those attributes. So I love that you all had a chance to do that. Thank you so much for sharing. And there are some no kidding questions that you can ask to help refine your discerning eye. And so I'm going to throw those in the chat. These are some of the questions you can ask. Does it work? Is it consistent? How does it conform to some of the other letters? You know, do some letters stick out and don't look like they belong, or do things look pretty consistent? And how does maybe one letter positively influence other letter forms? And we're going to get into that. And I just want to know, do your letters live harmoniously with one another? And that's what we're going to be looking for. But now I want us to jump back into our handouts and take a look at them so that we can get on to this next exercise. So I did that. I did my original pangram that I shared on my paper, but here I went ahead and wrote it on the actual handout. That's on page 3. And now I'd like for you to go ahead, after you've heard all these wonderful things, but you could have done this before too, rate what you would say your pangram, your baseline. That's what this is here. What is your baseline writing? How do you feel about it? Do you feel weak? It'd be somewhere around 1. If you're feeling very strong, maybe it's a 10. Go ahead and write that down so that we've got it. You've went ahead and posted it. So thank you very much for doing that. You're welcome to continue to post on Padlet. And there's going to be a few things where I am going to ask you to post on Padlet. And now I want to talk about form following function and the difference between legibility, readability, and expression. And so a lot of times I'll hear people say, oh, I want to make sure that my handwriting is legible. And I always ask, what do you mean by that? And they say, well, I want people to be able to read it. I'm like, well, that's readability. So what's the difference between legibility and readability? And the way that I define legibility might be how I write things so that so that I feel good about it being written like, oh, this is very straight, it's very clean, it's very clear. Whereas readability is about how other people are going to read it. Now, why did I do legibility in all caps? Because there's a lot of straight lines. And when we go to write lowercase, sometimes we don't feel as confident writing in lowercase because there's a lot of curved letters. But here's the thing, and some of you may have heard me give you this example before. If we write in all caps, then what happens is we have to look at each one of these shapes individually as shapes, put them all together, and then know that that word is the word shape. However, if we write in lowercase, what happens is that the human eye, can see the ascenders and the descenders very quickly, and they can recognize that letter or that word much faster. And you know, if you think about it too much, you're like, no, I can argue that. But here's the thing, we're talking about a blink of an eye. That's why when we see people writing in all caps, we think they're yelling at us because we've got to slow down and read what they're writing. Whereas if we're reading a novel, notice everything's in sentence caps, so it's lowercase, or a newspaper. It's all lowercase, and that's to help us see and be able to read things quickly. And when we get to expression, then it might take a little bit longer. It might be, maybe it doesn't really follow a lettering style. Maybe our letters connect, maybe they don't. It can still be in all caps or lowercase, doesn't matter. But the idea is we're changing up the way we're writing to express ourselves and again, to slow down the reader. Yeah, Brandy's saying she's always thrown off by highway signs in all caps because you have to get so much closer to the sign to read it, right? Because all of those capital letters just kind of blend into each other, right? And I think that the state and the State Department probably just believes that having all caps is readable. Well, it's legible. They can type it and it looks good. But if you've ever noticed, even some street signs that are all caps are a little bit harder than if they have uppercase and lowercase and plenty of space around them. So yes. So that's literally the difference between those. So when do we use them? Well, we use legibility when we want to really focus on our form. When this is the me factor. Readability is really for others. And expression is for we, and also maybe to communicate understanding, right? Or communicate emotion. So does anybody have anything else to add to legibility versus readability versus expression, and when and where we would use these things, or questions?
Heather, I just have one question,
Yeah.
as it pertains a little bit to something that happens to me. Just in the word expression, you wrote your S two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, does that affect, that's just related to the form, I guess. It doesn't affect the others, or it would kind of affect the legibility maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it could affect readability and legibility, but expression is more of a personal thing, right? And so there's a couple of rules about when we write two letters that are the same letter next to each other. We're not machines, so the chances of them being exactly alike are not always good. So a lot of times we may write one bigger, one smaller, one with a descender, you know, something to make them different. That's one rule. The other thing here is notice how I combined my E and my S because it was a natural join. And then the next one, if I were to go through here, if I were to write an S like this and go through there and write another S, this starts to look like a really strange glyph that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I don't put lines through my letters. This is more of a cursive style. I don't do that because there's a whole lot of stuff going on in there, right? And the eye can get a little confused. It's really not that readable. So when I do things like when I write the word passion, and I write this a lot because I'm passionate, I purposefully write those two letters slightly differently. Now, if that bothers you, I'd love to know. But really, this line and this line are really quite similar. I just have that connector on that one, which makes them also very different. So for me, that's expressive. And I'm not really worried about legibility or readability here. This is me expressing myself. What you don't want to do is use expression if you're trying to increase readability or legibility, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And so
Great.
if you when you write your S, kind of, if it's a word with just an S, then your S is actually, it's not like a looped S. It's an actual, it's a more like a
If you're saying if there's only one S,
uh-huh.
I think
Like
it depends on, I think it depends on what lettering style. So yes, I certainly wrote it not a loopy S. I didn't write a script S here. I wrote a print S, but I think again goes back into the style that I'm trying to convey. And so a lot of times, I mean, I really don't use this very much except for when I'm using script writing. Yeah. Good. Any other questions or anything anyone would like to add? Yes, Linda.
Yeah, Heather, I have a question. So are you saying that you shouldn't cross letters or that you don't cross letters? I found, because I wrote passion like 5 times, and I found that I write PAS, but then when I get to the second S, I loop the bottom into the I.
Ah,
That comes
okay.
up next.
Okay. Yeah. And that's okay. If that's expressive to you, ask yourself, is it readable?
But is it readable? Yeah, I'm looking at it going, I always look at context, but not everybody does that. So
right.
I get a lot of people that say, hey, I can't read your handwriting.
Yeah, right. And so that's an excellent question. I'm not going to give you any rule at this point. And I think you said the key word, and that's context. Why are we using it? Go back to that form follows function. Why am I writing it this way? And is it following? Am I trying to express myself or am I trying to make it readable? And if you're trying to make it readable and someone says, I can't read your handwriting, then there's a go back there, right? To look at it. Excellent. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer here. I think now it's about circumstantial and context. Yeah. Francesca. Yeah, thank you. Francesca, yeah.
No. Well, I just saw Joe's comment about the express.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, but I see that you've captured it, that it communicates emotion and also visual too.
Right.
Like, I don't know why, but when I hear express, I might see a jet flying or, something right away. Whereas if I just saw it written plainly, it wouldn't necessarily conjure up an image for me.
Right. Exactly. And I love what Joe is saying about it also relates to putting emphasis on a word. So if we're doing a quote or if we're in graphic recording and we want to put emphasis on one word that we keep hearing and we have supporting words around it, our supporting words might be lowercase and small, and then our expressive word might be bigger or colorful or in a different lettering style. Excellent. Thank you, Ludi, for that. I'm loving these thumbs up. Yes. Expression communicates style. So Jessica, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I really liked when you talked about shape in capitals and in lowercase.
Yes.
Because even if you kind of cover half of the text of the lowercase one, your brain can still make something out of it. So it really hit me when you talked about that. So it was nice. Yeah, or if you cover the bottom, then just having half of the letters, you may not have it correct because you don't know what's below there. You can play a joke with it, right? But your brain will still try to make something out of it.
Yes. So this P in shape could be a B or an R or a P. Yeah. But we know with this shape right here, I'm trying to think if there's any other letters that do that in lowercase. And the answer is no. Yeah. Oh. That's a great example. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Neelam.
Just a quick question. Could you explain the difference between legibility and readability one more time? Because when you were talking, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But now I think I lost it.
Yeah. So a lot of people think it's the same thing. Legibility is probably something that we want to learn when we're first learning lettering, right? When we're first learning how to write as children, we want to make sure that we make it very clear and that we're learning forms. We're literally learning our ABCs. But readability is about how are we writing it so others can assimilate it well. And I give this example here mainly because for those who may have learning challenges or any kind of comprehension disabilities, visual disabilities when reading letters, I don't know, I can't guarantee that it helps with dyslexia, but I do know a lot of visual practitioners that work with groups that have, diverse thinking methods and thinking approaches, that they really do need to write in lowercase because it's more accessible. Yeah. And honestly, when I'm graphic recording, a lot of times I am writing this express here. This is my uppercase handwriting, and it's very close to Sign Painter. And so sometimes if I'm writing really fast, I write in all uppercase because to me, I can get it down on the paper quickly. But
Yeah.
when I go to writing lowercase, it takes longer because there's more rounded letters. Yeah. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thanks.
Great. Excellent. Any more questions or anything else anyone wants to add? All right, we are in it now. However, we're coming up to a time where we're going to have a short break. And so here is what we're going to do next. And this is going to go so fast. You're going to go, wait, did I learn anything? Yeah. What we're doing is making time to focus on those letters. And then I'm going to ask you to make some time this week and go back and look at some of these exercises. So prior to this session, some of you emailed me. So thank you very much. But some of you recently signed up and didn't have time to do the pre-work, and that's okay. Given what you learned or what you want to learn and gain from this experience, what I'd like to know is what questions do you need to ask in order to meet your learning and your handwriting expectations? And so this is really important. When you think back about what you want to get out of this class, I want to know what questions do you need to ask in order to meet those expectations, because I don't want to miss a beat. This is pretty high touch. Many of you have already emailed me and I've answered some great questions. You've shown me some examples of your work and we're going in deep. I'm going to do that more in the Padlet, but I want you to take this time. I want you to take this time to think up those questions. And if you need to take a break, we'll do a built-in break with this. And type those questions in the chat. So we've got a little bit of time here. So I'm going to give you 8 minutes to type those in the chat. And if for some reason you are on a tablet or something and it's not easy to type in the chat, then I would say when we get back from break, I'm going to ask you to just unmute and you can ask me those questions if it's difficult for you to type for whatever reason. So in the meantime, I'm going to ask you to think of those questions, get up, move around, walk around, get something to drink, stay hydrated. And when we get back in 7.5 minutes, I'm going to answer your burning questions and take into consider what you're asking. It might already be in the curriculum. All right. So as I read through these, and there's so many questions, this would turn into an 1.5 hour answer fest if I literally went through all of these. So I'm reading them. Some of them have the answers in this 2-part class, but here's what I will promise you, that between this session and next session, I will answer all of these in a custom video that I'll give you. It'll be a bonus video because most of these, like I said, most of these questions are going to get answered through the process that we're going to go through over these 2 sessions. Yep. So I do want to go back because Lisa is asking, how can I create readability? And one of the things that I said was to work in lowercase. So can you, and Brandy, that's your number 1 question too. So if I didn't answer that already, can you expand on your question so I can better understand? Either Lisa or Brandy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I just realized that personally, that's what I need to create. I was thinking that the way that you had worded this, that these were questions we were supposed to ask ourselves. So I don't know that I'm necessarily looking for an answer from you. about the readability part, but because you brought, I mean, I guess because it ties into the lowercase, I am wondering how you transition to lowercase when that hasn't been your style for a long time, or cursive and capital print have been my style, and I do tend to merge them sometimes.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm making sense.
That's all right. That's okay. Let me digest that for a second. And Brandy, can you expand on that?
Sure.
Okay.
For me, the big thing is how much, like your observation about how much my letters touch. There's some of those transitions I feel confident and elegant, but when am I losing legibility? Also, I find that if I slow down enough to not make my letters bump up against each other, next to each other, that it's more readable, but it also feels kind of clunky. Like you can see like my lettering looks more hesitant. So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like, that's the number one thing for me, is about separating letters from each other. When when is it paying off and when is it not? If that
Right.
makes sense.
Okay. And Lisa, did that help at all? Or is that are you having two different experiences, both of you, in readability? Because I'm hearing two different things.
Yeah, I think it's different.
Yeah. And that's fine, because introducing the idea of legibility versus readability, I think it might still take a little bit of time to wrap the head around that. And if you're already doing things that are legible, that's great. How can we make them more readable? That's another piece. And I think to answer your question, Lisa, is that you have a little bit of a shift in, do you want to do more lowercase? And if that's in script, because I'm guessing you're not writing all capital script. No, you're writing all caps, which are like Roman, right, in print. And then when you go to lowercase, it can be script. And I think that's fine. And can you make script readable, meaning it's not just it's clear, meaning it's legible, but it's also readable to other people, and that's okay. You don't have to do print. I'm doing print here because I want to show that, but you're also going to see where I can make some connections too, a lot like the way Brandy did. Now, if you have letters that usually connect, like her E and her I, her T and her Y, if those letters connect frequently, you're creating a consistent pattern for the reader, and that's fine. But if you start those letters, if you always connect those, and then one time you don't connect it, it looks jarring. And that is reflected in what she just said in terms of it feeling like clunky, right? And it's just like driving a car. When we go from, when we're on a straight street and we're going from stop sign to stop sign, it's pretty straightforward. We stop, we go, we feel pretty confident, that nobody's going to walk out in the middle of the street. They're going to do it at the crosswalk, at the stop sign kind of thing. So we just go forward, and we can go pretty quickly on the highway. When we're going around a mountain, we've got to go much slower. And if there's rocks falling, it's going to get clunky quick, right? And so just know that you're not going to have a perfect experience lettering all the time. Just like in life, we can't be happy all the time. You're going to hit some roadblocks if you're working quickly, if you're listening and having to capture something. And where I think things get clunky is when we write letters we haven't written very frequently, and when we start writing words that we don't normally write. And so the letter combinations are different. And then that's where the spacing kind of throws us off. And then that's where things get a little wobbly. And so this is where we're gentle on ourselves. And again, I'm going back and looking at these questions, and they're fantastic. And I can't wait to make a custom video for you, because we still have a lot of exercises here. And again, a lot of the exercises that I'm about to show you are going to answer a lot of these questions. Okay, and so I'm going to save this chat. I'm going to move my keyboard. We're going to go on to page 4, which is, this is where we're going to practice that form. So now we're going to get into some of the legibility a little bit, and then we're going to get later on, we're going to do more readability and expression stuff. But what I want you to do is to have your fonts that you've chosen either printed out and next to you or on your screen. And we're not trying, I mean, we're going to do a little bit of copying, but we're not trying to change our handwriting. We're trying to train our eyes. And so what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we're looking at what's called the mother shape. So if we look at, grab a red pen here. If we look at, say, the capital letter O and how it's shaped, no matter what you're looking at, we're also going to look at like letters like the Q, part of the D, the G, the C, and these are going to be a shape that we're going to look for when we do our curves. Now, again, our straight lines are pretty, those are pretty apparent, right? They're vertical, they're horizontal. For most cases, sometimes there's a slant. We're going to go down and we're going to look at that for our lowercase as well. And we have more letters here that are rounded. So now we're going to look at how does that look with our A, and have they given us what's called a two-story A, or have they given us an A that looks like this? So we're looking at that rounded shape in all of these letters, and you can go over it with your pencil. You can go over it with a colored pen or pencil, something that's different, just so that you get a sense of, oh, this is the shape. And when they gave us the G, did they again give us a two-story G? So, oops, notice that our A and our G, I call those two stories, or is it just one? Okay, so I'm looking at all of these shapes. Your S may reflect it, it may not. Part of your U might be reflected. And then I want you to look at the N. So the N is oftentimes also a mother shape. And what the N shows us is where is the branching. Now the branch is where a line comes away from the stem, right? So say we're looking at our letter H here. We have a tall line and the stem comes out. Now, most of you are going to hear me in any of my lettering classes where I say, if you're going to write a letter N, you're going to start from the baseline, come up and branch out. That's going to give you the most consistency. In this particular lettering style, however, it is really hard to come up and stay straight that long without branching out. Now, in most handwriting, I do not recommend this approach of writing a stem and then coming out, because it can end up doing lots of different things. However, if you're going slow enough, this is fine. But if you're having to go fast, your writing tool is already down at the baseline, come up and come out. Because we want that branching, you'll notice it's consistent in the H, the M, the N, and even if we flip over the U, look at your own letters, you're going to see that in there in a font that is a consistent font, meaning it's not a handwriting font. So what we're looking for here are the mother shapes. So go ahead and in your practice area, whether it's another piece of paper or on this handout, go ahead and try to mimic that shape. And this is something that you could literally spend hours on. And if you've taken a class from someone like Jürgen Bekimst, I'm sorry, he is going to have you doing Palatino, which is very similar to this. And you're going to go very slowly. Now, I'm still writing very quickly. Compared to him, I would, an entire page, I used to spend 3 hours a day in his class, and I would only fill up a page. That's how long it took me. And for those of you who are graphic recorders, you know that we can fill up a 4x8 feet in like 70 or 45 minutes, right? In some cases. Okay. So just notice, if you slow down, can you mimic that mother shape? And if you have any questions, go ahead and unmute. So Brandy's asking how to find and print an exemplar like this. So what I did is I went to myfonts.com and I typed in my favorite font and I told it to show the exemplar, and I just took a screenshot and then did that. But I'm glad you asked that, and I will also make a quick video. I'll put that in the video as well of where to do that. But you can go to any font page and do that. But you can also type it out. You can just go through your word processor and type that out. I went ahead and captured some of these other characters, the numbers as well. And I can look at my numbers and say, okay, what shapes are in there that mimic these other letters? And go ahead, if you're used to the capital letters and you want to stay there, go ahead and do those. If you want to, and I'm a little wobbly too, but if you want to go and challenge yourself to do lowercase because it's not something you've done in a while, that's fine too. And the slower you go, the wobbly you might be, because you might be writing as you're looking at something else. So my suggestion is look at what you're going to do, look at what you want to mimic, and then if you can, visualize it on your paper. You may need lines or graph paper to do that. You can draw it in the air before you do it, and then go slowly as you do it. And if you do find that there's a hesitation in there, I have one right there, it was because I was looking at my mark making tool as it was hitting the paper. Now, anytime we're going to do something rounded, whether it's a total circle or even if it's a squared off circle, what I want you to think about when a tip is that you can do quadrants, right? So, and it doesn't have to be across like that. Can actually be an X if that feels better, because a lot of times in calligraphy, when we're writing an O or a rounded letter, we're starting at the 1 o'clock position if this were a clock, and we're going in a direction. And so what I mean by that is if I break this up into quadrants, I can then say, okay, I'm going to start and I'm going to make an arch, and then I'm going to look at my trajectory, meaning I'm going to look at where I'm going to make the next arch, and the next arch, and the next arch. And the next time I write it, I am looking at where I want my marker to go or my pen to go, not where it's touching the paper. When we see our pen touching the paper, what happens is we might go, oh, hold on. We might pause. Oops. We might think too much. We might not get the reaction we want as quickly. So we're going in quadrants or making arches a quarter of the way. And so what this exercise, what the purpose of this exercise is to train your eye, see if you can make a similar shape. Now, hopefully you chose a lettering style that was aesthetically pleasing to you. Some of you might find that when you go to compare that to your original pangram, compare your the font that you chose to your pangram, you might be like, whoa, I'm way off, right? How many of you chose a font that didn't look anything like your own handwriting? Yeah, and it's like, whoa, that's a pretty big chasm, right? And so here's where you get to make a decision. Do I want to go look for another font at another time? Then redo this exercise. And if not, if you're like, no, this is good, or if you do find another font that you like, you can do the exercise again. But the reason why I'm asking you is to compare what you have here and what you just wrote, because this might be the missing link in between these two. It's because I'm having you look at form. Because some of you have written me and said, I want to write like you. And my response is, well, I want you to write like you. And if you find something from me, like if you say, oh, wait, I really like your 2-story A, however I make that, and I make it a lot of different ways, depending on how fast I'm going, then you can make a 2-story A. That's fine. And it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. Write a few and see what they look like for you. But what I'm trying to do is to help you see, where do you want to go and where do you naturally go, right? So some of you have heard me say this, and if you were in my tools of the trade class last week, you definitely heard me say this. There is a place. Okay, first let me ask you, how many of you have sat in a beanbag chair before? Comfy, right? Hard to get out of, right? Yeah, you got to kind of roll out of it. And if you got bad knees, then you're really rolling, you're barrel rolling out of it. Okay, so here's the thing about handwriting. When we write quickly and comfortably, that's like sitting in our beanbag chair. When we find a lettering style we like, and the reason why I had you choose one that's not a handwriting style is I don't want you to copy someone's handwriting. I want you to look at the mother form or the mother shape and write your own version of that. Is now I want you to figure out what is aesthetically pleasing to you. What's your goal? What's that? What do you want that to look like? And somewhere in the middle is where you're going to land. But here's the thing. When you start going fast, you're going to fall back into your beanbag chair. When you're not thinking about it normally, you're going to fall back into your beanbag chair if you're just like writing, right? But when you're trying to be intentional, you're going to get closer to your aesthetic. And here's the part that that I've said for many years, and that is, if where you want to be is here, and you feel like you're here, where you want to be is just at the ends of your fingertips. You just have to keep going. But if you practice anything like swimming or golf or any sport that requires form, guess what? Your expectations are going to get higher and higher, and it's going to go like this. And this is why we're lifelong learners. So I want you to be gentle with yourself. Recognize when you are in your beanbag chair and when you want to be more intentional about your lettering. And that goes back to that form following function and form reflecting what it is you want to create. Okay. So any questions about the beanbag chair and where we want to be aesthetically? Can anybody? Yeah.
I actually changed two of my letters when I did the visual thinking thing for Brandy. It was the A, because I did the 1-story A and now I'm writing the 2-story A. So I've been doing that now for about 3 years. And even when I'm rushed, I now write the 2-story A. So it is doable, just takes time.
Right.
For the E is the other one I changed. That is still a little bit hard if I'm in a hurry.
So if those of you are saying, what about this 2-story A? I'm going to give you an example of why the 2-story A can be really, really helpful. And that is because when you write an E, if you write a 2-story A, notice that the distance between the end of that E and the start of that A is very close. And if you write an E and then have to go all the way over here to write this A and go backwards, it's extra time. And so this EA is incredibly efficient. And it's actually the most common letter combination for English speaking language, and maybe for other languages as well. And so that's why that EA 2-story A is a great combination. Now, some of you have also reached out and said that you like my letter G, probably because it's stylized. So let me break it down for you, for those of you who want to know how to make that 2-story G. And I will tell you that when I first started writing this 2-story G, it came about accidentally. I just wrote it one time because I wanted to try it. And then I went, okay, that's my favorite letter. I'm going to focus on writing all my G's like that for the next 2 weeks. And actually, you should make it 3 weeks because they say that if you do something for 3 weeks, it can turn into a habit. And so if you say, okay, I'm going to adopt one letter at a time, here's how to write that 2-story G. The first thing is again, I'm pretending like this is a clock. I'm thinking about my mother's shape, and I'm writing that G, and it's slightly smaller than the X height. I started at the 1 o'clock position, and it's slightly smaller. So there's a little bit of air down there. It's actually about 2/3. So I made it a little bit too big there. And then I'm going to write the ear. Think about like an ear on like a pig's ear. And then starting at the 5 o'clock position. So actually I'm starting over here. I'm backtracking and I'm making like a little C. Now, when you write this, and a lot of times you'll notice I'll write and then I'll leave that and I'll write the rest of whatever I'm writing. And then I'll come back and say, how do I want to end that G? And if you write a few of these, this is where it can get really fun. You can then decide, do I want it to just come back around itself? Do I want it to be long? Do I want it to be wide? Or do I just want it to end right there? So that 2-story G can be legible, readable, or expressive. It's probably not the most readable, but if you're consistent and you always write at least the top part the same, notice that some of mine are closed, this one's open. Sometimes I even write it like that. It's very common, but I have to be intentional. So I can't just jump back into my beanbag chair and know that a new letter that I'm writing, I'm always going to write the same. So here's where we've got choices. Yeah, and I like that you're saying, Brandy, that you like the 2-story A. It is distinctly different than O and U. Yes, it can be. So it could be that some of your letters just don't fit that. As long as it's consistent with itself, that's good. Helps a lot for readability, writing fast. Yeah, excellent. So now I think you're all trying some things, but some of you might be in the thinky phase, right? Like, oh, you might be overthinking it. Oh, you haven't. And it's because you haven't written enough of it. So for you thinky people, I'm going to ask you, how good do you want to get? Where is that goal line? Has it gotten a little further, or have you brought it back so you can be a little bit more comfortable? Because you don't want your goal line to be so far away from your beanbag chair that you're not doing the work or you get overwhelmed. So define what good is, define that goal, and determine how willing are you to put in the effort. How many times are you willing to get out of that beanbag chair in a day? And how long do you want to spend in that beanbag chair? And how will you know if you're there? So these are going to be some really good questions. I'll put that in the follow-up email so that you have them, because they're things that I'd love for you to ponder. Now, for those of you that are like, okay, enough with the thinky, you're ready to move on. That's great. So now we're going to jump in, and I want to answer some of your questions around consistency. And what I'm going to put in the chat next are the top five attributes of consistency. Form and shape, which we've just done. Proportion and tool for the job, which I'm going to show you next. Slope, baseline, and spacing. So let's talk about what they are. All right. Oh, I had some things down here. Compare what you just wrote. Yeah, that's right. So we talked about that. All right. So, this isn't in the handout. I don't know why, but the top 5 attributes, let's go through those. Your form and shape are key, and it's okay if you haven't mastered it because you've only been doing this for an hour and a half. So be gentle on yourself. But what I mean by that form and shape is looking at that O, maybe looking at your A, looking at your N, and how those letters might look like other letters. Proportion and tool for the job looks like this. I'm writing at this size right now because I know that it's a good size for this tool, and I want you all to be able to see it. I can also zoom way in so you can see it a little bit better too. Now, if I write too small with this, what happens? Can anybody unmute and tell me what happens if I write too small?
You can't read it.
You can't read it because the counter space fills up, right?
Yeah,
So
the pen is too thick for the size of the letter.
That's right. That counter space fills up and it just becomes a little dot. So you need to be able to write big enough for that style, for that tool. So if you grab a tool and you're like, I don't know, then a good way to do it is write an E, write an E and an A, and then write it bigger and bigger until you're like, okay, which one feels good? Always go by feel. Which one looks good? What's comfortable? And even though if I underline feel, that feels good, and I circle looks, that looks good, I have to say, okay, I'm comfortable here. I'm always going to do this naturally, but I'm going to strive to do this. And so that's going to tell me where I need to push, right? Don't get too thinky, go back to the body and feel it. So this is proportion for tool to job. So same thing, this is a 1 millimeter tool. That's how big the nib is. This is a 0.7. So if I then do the same thing, but I go really small. Oops, I turned it so this started getting wobbly. So this to me is the place where it looks and feels good. Yay. Now I know that this is a great tool at this size. And then as we get bigger, let me go way big on this. If you're using a really big wedge nib tool, some of you are graphic recorders, so you're using this great big tool, you're getting ready to do a title. The reason why I have you do Neuland hand at 4, calligraphers do it at 3.5, 4 nib widths high, is so that we can get the E and its counter spaces. Because if I did it at 3 nib widths high and I have 3 crossbars, guess what? It's not readable. So this is the primer, this is the code, the key, the secret to great lettering. When you're going to do a title, you need to have it at least 4 nib widths high, and you can go higher. So a lot of times, and now you all are going to have a keen eye, go look online at the graphic recordings that are done, whether it's digital or with a marker, but usually it happens with the marker first, because with digital, they can do undo and correct themselves, is that if you see a title and you get to that E and they're like, whoa, I have to make it bigger, it's because they hadn't thought about it when they started writing. And that happens to a lot of us. It can also happen with the G and the S and the R, letters that have a lot going on in there. But the E is a great letter to always test out with your tool, whether you're writing lowercase or uppercase, to determine if it's the right proportion for the job. Now, the next thing on the 5 attributes of consistency is slope. And what you've seen so far here, everything has been straight. However, if we're going to write a script, we want all of our letters, script meaning italic or a brush letter, we want all of our letters to go in a slope. And so what does that look like? If we were to write, I'm going to go ahead and write my ABCs here, and I'm going to do it in print. I can also do it in a script, I guess. But even if I'm going to do it in a print, all of my stems, all of my letters, even if they don't have a stem, are going to follow that slope. Now, at first, you might think, oh, that's so slow. But if you're doing italic, it's designed for speed for right-handers, because we're writing quickly. And by having that slope, it's delivering our letter ready for the next letter, because it's getting us closer up and to the right. Now, lefties, you're having to push this whole way. And so you might have to adjust how you write. Either you might be doing a hook, you might be doing a pinky lead, meaning you're using that to leverage yourself. You might be writing under the line. And again, for those lefties out there, contact me and I'll give you a free one-to-one session because we can go over that and when you use those angles, and it all depends on what you're using it for. Now, my suggestion, because I thought I was smart when I first started lettering and said, I don't need those slope guidelines. And I learned brush lettering in contemporary pointed pen without the slope, and I never got it right. I just never got it right. So when I started teaching brush lettering, I asked Noylan to create, if I could create a template for them. And this is the brush lettering template, so that when I do have a brush marker in my hand or even a round nib, and I can show you with both of these, that I am writing along with that slope line. I've even designed the width of these slope lines to coincide with the lettering style so that I get my spacing right. I want you to be able to see. And what I mean by those slope lines, again, it's these lines. It's these semi-diagonal. They're not, this goes a little bit out, but that's because I'm a curvy person, not a straight line person, right? So that's going to help you be consistent. And it doesn't matter if you're doing script brush lettering or if you're doing print. So if I were to do a print, again, I'm going to go a little bit smaller because this tool is smaller. I'm following those slope lines, okay? So that slope, and again, I'm doing it at that degree. Let me go back and if you find, actually, I want to go back to my original. I'm just going to tear it out so I can access it easily. If I look at this original down here, are my slope lines, oops, are my slope lines the same? And when do they change? That one, if I start to split some of them in the middle, they're a little quirky, but I write this quirky, especially this one because I'm used to writing it a lot. Look at how these slope lines are kind of all over the place, because what I'm doing is I'm rotating my letters for it to be fun. Expressive, but not readable, right? So that slope is important. The next thing is the baseline. So where are we writing our letters on? Are they on a line? If you're using lined paper and you're actually looking at it, believe me, I've given people lined paper and they totally ignore it and just write wherever they want anyway. But if you're looking at the lines and you're writing on them, that's your baseline. However, you can decide if you want a different kind of baseline. You can say, what if I want a wave? And a lot of times I write in a curve like this, and I have to decide, am I going to write along the curve, meaning my vertical line is going to be 90 degrees no matter where it touches? Or am I always going to write straight up and down no matter where it touches? So what might that look like? Notice I am moving the angle of my hand every time I write a letter. I went along like this. But if I'm going to keep all of my stems straight, I'm not going to change the angle of my hand. I'm going to keep everything straight, but notice, I'm going to use a totally different color here because we've got a lot going on, that these are going to change. So you can choose, how do you want to use a baseline? Do you want it straight? Do you want it curvy? Do you want your letters to bounce? And again, that's all about readability or expression. Do I want to catch the eye? Do I want to keep it clean? Any questions so far before I hit spacing, before I cover spacing? Because that's our That's our tough one. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, so with the slope, the important thing is the consistency in the slope. So you can practice writing these italic or brushstroke scripts to learn like the consistency of a sloped, but if the baseline height writing that we have is straight, then that's okay to keep it straight as long as it's consistent.
Yes, absolutely. So here we're combining our baseline with our slope line. Once you determine your baseline, which way do you want your letters to follow? Do you want them to be straight up and down and they just, what I called, bouncing? Or do you want them to also rotate along with the baseline? Good. And that's something that just being conscious of that is going to help you decide it's going to help you be more consistent. Because sometimes we'll write something out and go, oops, I didn't think about that part. Yeah. Good.
Heather, I have a question going back to when your letters were in different slopes.
Yeah.
And you said that it was unreadable. How is it unreadable?
Well, if you look at it and you're like, I can read it, that's fine. But what we're trying to do when we're doing something long form, meaning if we have a lot of words on a page, if it's a really big quote, like 16 lines, or if we're doing a big graphic recording, we want there to be consistency in the slope and the form, because if all of a sudden I start writing my A's and my G's differently, then they have to like figure out, oh, wait, there's a new code, right? This is sort of like having a secret password code and knowing, is there a code to this? And so having them kind of jaunt back and forth, it kind of makes the eye go, wait, I have to go back. Is that the same letter? Because they've changed the slope. Now with an L, not a big deal, right? But with some of these letters, it can be if they're more difficult to identify as a letter.
Okay.
Great question. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or anything to add?
Just a quick question,
Yeah.
Heather. In the first one, where you said the letters are bouncing and rotating, but the slope line that you have that's not like if I wanted to just practice something like that, the slope line is not 90 degrees to the baseline, right?
Are you talking about this one, A or
The
B?
top one.
The top
A.
one. Yeah. And so when I say 90 degrees, what I mean by that is that if this is our baseline, I'm saying it's going to rotate. So in this spot right here, it's 90 degrees. In this spot right here, it's 90 degrees. In this spot right here, it's 90 degrees. Whereas when I say that, let's do a much deeper slope.
Okay.
If I go like that, that's not 90 degrees because I don't have 90 degrees on both sides. I have like 30 and 100 and somebody do the math for me.
Yeah.
Right. But you get the idea, right? So this is 90
Yeah.
degrees in relation to that line right there.
Right. I think just that the deeper curve explained it. So got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And sometimes you'll make that choice based on what you're comfortable doing because you've done it. And sometimes you're going to make that choice because you're like, ooh, I want it to look a certain way. So that's when you got to slow down. And so if you are someone who are like, I really want to bounce my letters all the time, come up with your own formula, come up with your way of doing it so that it's a reliable way. Because again, we're always going to go back to that comfortable place because it's just natural. Change can be hard, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We might want it, but we have to change the way we do things in order to get there.
Yeah, I think the curve line, especially because I work digitally and I don't even have to think twice before writing on a curve line digitally. But when it comes to analog, I'm lost, like just completely lost. So this is very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So here's where I'm going to back out for a minute, meaning I'm going to zoom out a bit. And now I'm going to show you a secret. This can be used by anyone, but this I use a lot and I teach a lot in my visual practitioner classes. And for those of you who are doing like quotes and you're totally freestyling it, meaning you're not using any kind of a light box or anything like that, you're just going to freestyle it. Say you want to do a curve because you want to put it in a banner, right? So you might want to put it inside of a banner. You're not going to draw the banner first. You're going to draw the letters first. But in order to get that curve, I have this way of making sure that it's going to be the same height the whole way. Because if you're anything like me and writing big, The letters that I wrote over here may not end up being the same size as the letters I write over here. So what I do is I determine how tall do I want that letter. That's going to go back to the proportion of my tool. I'm going to decide, is it how many nib widths, whatever that height is, doesn't matter at this point, but I'm going to show you the technique. So what I do is I hold my mark making tool. I put it inside of my thumb and my forefinger, right? And I can either hold it like this, meaning I'm going to clamp it with my thumb. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to make sure that it's resting against my hand here. This is a key piece, right? And I can put my finger down here. Now, what I'm going to do, let me make sure I get this right, because I've taught this different ways depending on how people's grips are. Okay. So you can do it with your thumb, you can do it with your pinky. So I'm going to hold it like this. So I'm holding it with I'm resting it on my middle finger, holding it with this finger. Lefties, you're just going to go the opposite way. And then I've got it on the crook of my thumb here, so it can really lead wherever. This pinky and the tip of this pencil have to stay at the same width the whole time. So I'm going to lock my hand in this position, and I'm not going to look at where I'm going to draw. I'm going to put my other finger down here, and I'm only going to look at this line. And the reason why I'm going to put my finger down here is to focus on it. And this isn't taped down, so this is probably going to move on me. Let me see if I can. Okay, so I'm going to lock my hand into place, and then I'm slowly going to draw this so that I have this same size. So now I have however big I want to make these letters. So for the lefties, same idea, but you're going to go from this side, lock that into place. You're going to feel, you might have to like move your head or angle your body different so that you can see the line. That's going to give you that general size. And if you have to go back, erase, that's fine. And you can always do this on a piece of paper with a pencil, and then go over it with a really dark marker and put a piece of paper on top of it if you're a calligrapher. And if you're a visual practitioner, you can erase the line or leave it. Nobody's going to see it from across the room. This is not cheating. This is about using your tools. So I call this the pencil trick, and it's the way to do that. And if you're like, but wait, I'm going to write uppercase and lowercase, decide where you want that X height to go. Go ahead and draw yourself a little road. And then you've got a place for your X height and ascenders, and then you can go below that. Once you've written whatever it is you're going to write, however you're going to write it, okay, doesn't matter. Then you can go back and say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and draw my banner. However you best like to draw your banners, okay? So you're going to do your baseline. You're going to decide how you're going to write that. You're going to write that and then draw whatever is going to be around it. Was that helpful? Or is that like a side? Some of you liked it. Okay. Some of it's useful to some of you. Okay, cool. Let's go on to spacing, unless anybody has any other questions. Spacing is the mother of all detriment. That's why it's the last in the consistency, and it's the hardest to learn. Why? Because we have 26 letters, and I can't even tell you how many combinations in the different languages, letter combinations in the different languages we have to choose from. But there is one rule that we already know, and that is every letter in the alphabet is either shaped like a rectangle or a square, a circle or an oval, or some type of a triangle, upside down or right side up. And spacing, there's two different kinds of spacing. We have what's called mechanical spacing, which means, I don't have a ruler here, but if I were to use the lines on this page, I would say, okay, then I'm going to write my O here. I'm going to take this over here, and then I'm going to write my triangle here. And this is the same amount of space like with a ruler, which that might look good from here. But the thing is we also have letters that have shapes within these shapes. So let's just look at this. When we have our spacing, we want to do what's called optical spacing, which means, or volume spacing, the volume between the letters need to be the same. So if I were to fill this up with water or sand, it's going to be the same. Where this is mechanical spacing. So if you remember the old typewriters that typed monospace, I mean, it's the same space between each letter. It didn't matter what letter it was. These letters were spaced the same amount. So when you got to a period, it was way out here. That's weird. That's why we had to space twice before we started the next sentence. So what we're looking for is that optical volume. And what happens is when we're writing with, say, I'm going to write the word 8 because A is a triangle. T is a rectangle, but not really. And then E is also a rectangle. So the space in here is actually, the T kind of goes like that on both sides. Not all the way, but you get the idea. And so now we have to say, okay, we've got some volume here we got to fill up, and some volume here we've got to fill up. And if we got any closer here or here, yeah, I would say here, they'd end up touching. And so when it comes to spacing, the best thing you can do is write out a word. It can be your name, whatever. Write it big. I'm not going to do my whole name. I don't care what lettering style you have. Then really space it apart. Like really space it apart. And then space it really close together to the point where it's almost touching. And what you want to do is you want to take this, put it across the room, say at least 5 to 10 feet, longer if you have a bigger room, and notice what parts of the letters need to come together and need to move a little bit further apart. So because I'm looking at this big space here between the E and the A, I think that this letter probably needs to go this way, or all these need to go this way, and this letter needs to go that way, just slightly. So you're going to imagine in your mind's eye how much space is between here. Oops, there's not enough space there. So I'm going to need to spread that out. And that's about training your eye. Now, when you start writing fast, it's like, ooh, eek. Again, if you've got the E and A spacing really well, then that's set, because that's very common when we're writing. And now we've got to think about all of the other letter combinations. So spacing is one of the most difficult ones. Who has difficulty with spacing? Yep. So just so you know, I do too. We all do. And that's something that if you feel a little wobbly or it starts to crumble, it's usually because of your spacing. And no matter who you are, no matter how fast you go, if you go faster than what you're normally used to, the wheels are going to fall off the bus. So be gentle with yourself. Even my handwriting looks terrible and not legible when I'm writing for myself really fast and nobody else has to look at it, right? Because I'm just writing down what's in my head. All right. Any questions about the top 5? Yeah.
Heather, I have a question about spacing. Most of the letters in heat are very clear where one letter ends and the other begins. But there's some letters that, for example, if you will make a Z, if you'll make a Z and then make something next to it. Okay.
Yep. That's not a straight line.
Yeah. It's hard for me to determine, is the volume from the top bar of the C to the lower bar of the Z where I'm looking, okay, it curves.
Yeah. So think of there being like a little bit of a buffer in there.
Yeah, there's like an optical center in some work, and that's very hard for me to determine.
Yeah. If any of you decide to make your own hand lettering font, one of the easiest things is just to write out the letters. The hardest thing is exactly what Susan was saying. It's called the optical width. what is the optical width of every single letter? And each letter, it's different. And for the letter A, it's actually right here because I'm splitting these two areas, these two negative space. The T is like this, right? So it's kind of here. So what you can do is you can write out all of your letters and figure out what the optical widths is. That's if you really want to take a deep dive. If you're like, can you give me the cheat sheet? I would say go to Sheila Waters' book, The Foundations of Calligraphy, and she shows all of the optical widths.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but that's for Roman hand. That's not for your handwriting. And your handwriting is distinct. And so it's going to be different. Yeah. And lowercase is a lot easier because we're dealing with a lot of round letters next to each other. We get a few straight ones, right? And then we'll get a round one, but there's a lot of round letters. And with the capital letters, there's a lot of straight letters. However, with like the T, you know, we've got something we've got to look at there. So yes, you're right. These letters are normal. What do we do with the K? We've got space inside of here. We ignore that and we think about that space. There's just a little bit of a cushion around that, but we've got to be able to fill in that volume. Great. What other questions do you have about spacing or the top 5 attributes?
Spacing after an L, is it just as easy as it seems like it would be, or is there a trick to that?
It depends on what the next letter is, right? Going back to
Let's
that
say it's
do
an
or
I,
yeah.
or an S.
Yeah, an S is always tricky because we have both space here and down here that we've got to contend with. And so with the letter L, we're going like this. So that's a really weird shape. And then what if the next letter were like, hold on a minute, if I write something like a J, then we've got almost too much space here. And darn it, I already wrote the letter. This is where we have to forgive ourselves. So if we are doing calligraphy or studio work where we've got time, this is where writing it out first and practicing it before you actually do it is key. If you are a visual practitioner and you have to write really fast because they're talking really fast, then it's critical that you space big on the titles and really close together and maybe even touching when you write small like this. Why? Because we get to draw in our audience to get closer to our work. And it tells them that if we're writing big and spaced apart, that's important. It's a title, it's a topic, it's something big and important in our work, in what we captured. If we're writing smaller, it's a detail, it's the fine print, it's the content. Makes sense. All right. So, yeah. So Ulian, did I answer your question? What's the difference between the angled slope and the straight slope? Which of the two works better for readability?
Yeah. I'm curious which, yeah, I think I'm not sure which to keep, because in the end, I see many advantages in using a straight slope, right?
Right.
But I see also more consistency if I increase the slope.
Right.
But
so this is,
I lose the legibility, the readability. So
yes. So you're getting it. So that goes back to, so this further defines, the difference between readability, legibility, and expression. So when we're going, and I've already lost my paper, when we're trying to go for legibility and readability, meaning I want to make sure I'm writing clearly and I want to make sure people can read it, then I'm going to have straight slopes. But if I want to express myself, then I might slope it. I might change the slope to express myself. Readability and legibility still can have a slant as long as it's consistent. Okay. And again, this is a new way of thinking about it. So it might take a little bit of time and practice of physically doing it, checking in with your body. but you've got a decision there. Yeah, that you can make before you start writing. Great.
Heather, really quick,
Mm.
there's a simple way. Is there a way, like how you did the curve with your little finger, that you keep your vertical slope or slant or whatever completely up and down and not starting to lean to the left? Do you know what I mean?
I think so. And I think my answer is
Other than using a slate flat out back guideline below it.
right, right. So one is slowing down and visualizing, or having something to copy from, something to look at over here, right? So that you're constantly focused. So it's about intention. And then the second thing is always staying in front of your work. So if you're
Okay.
writing really wide and you go out too far, especially visual practitioners, if they go out too far, they'll tend to write up or down. Their baseline can change, or they'll tend to slant because they'll lean.
Right. And what occurred to me is I write with my paper 45 to 90 degrees. So when I'm trying to write up and down, I look at it and when at 90 degrees and it's leaning to the left. And I
Right.
thought it was up and down.
Yes. So excellent. Thank you for sharing that. This is for calligraphers and people who are writing on their paper. This is called canting. So when you cant your paper, you're changing the direction. Now, I have a teacher that says always keep your paper straight and move with your pen, meaning don't like dig your elbow into your side to try to write right over here. Always keep your paper or your body moving to the right. But calligraphers, if you find this is not comfortable for me, you get to cant your paper. Visual practitioners don't get to do that because they've got a flip chart or a piece of paper on the wall that they don't get to move. They don't get to move a 4x8 sheet of paper and put it at a 30-degree angle. That would be ridiculous. Right? Plus we can move our bodies more, right? So yeah, excellent question. Did I answer that?
Yeah, no, kind of.
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure that out because I can't write with my paper at 90 degrees, but I also I'm not able right now yet to keep a 90-degree angle when my paper's at 45 to 90. So I'm trying to figure that out.
So there's a couple of things that might be happening. It might also be the height of your chair, the angle of your arm.
Okay.
And all of this changes for the visual practitioners who end up going to the wall and using a bigger tool. What happens is that you have a physical change from writing with a small tool with your fingers and sometimes your wrists on a horizontal plane where you're keeping your arm sort of bent. And then when you go to the wall, notice my arm is pointing down. You might have a little bit of a bend to it, depending on if you're writing high or low. The higher you write, the more you're under the line that you're writing. The lower you write, the more you tend to alter your body to be able to make it work. And because you're using a bigger mark making tool and you're writing bigger letters, you're going to use less of your fingers and more of your elbows and shoulders and maybe even your hips and knees. It's more of a full body experience. And so that's going to change. Your body dynamics are going to change. So for those of you who are writing at your table and you still can't get it quite right and stay consistent, look at the other ergonomics that are around you. Height of your chair or the height of your table, how far away you're writing, how close you're writing, and do you need to move whatever you're writing on to keep you comfortable? So sometimes when I'm doing a commission or something that has a lot of lines, I will physically set it up so that I'm comfortable because I'm going to be writing for a long time and it has to be consistent. And I'll reach out and figure out, am I going to lose my slope the further I get away from myself? And do I need to set this up so that I can move it back and forth?
That makes so much sense because I'm left-handed, but on a chalkboard, I can write with my right hand.
That's right. There you go. Because you can use different body dynamics. Yeah. I love it. Oh, I can't wait to meet with you.
I know, me too.
All right. Neelam saying both feet flat on the ground supports writing, drawing from the elbow as well. Absolutely. And if you're standing up and writing, then making sure that your feet are flat on the ground, probably shoulder width apart if that's comfortable for you, really feeling into your hips and noticing where your shoulders are in relationship to whatever you're writing on, whether it's horizontal like I'm doing now, and I'm going to now because I'm ready to start sitting, I'm going to change the way I'm working, or if you're at the wall, it's going to change as well. Great. Excellent. All right, so now we are on we're on the downward slope for this session, and we've got a few more things. We're going to start thinking about practicing. So what are some best practices in practicing? And so I'm going to show you. So let's talk about those. And the first thing I want to do is I know that we're not all English speaking people. However, I am going to show you this trick. And if English is not your native language, then I want you to do a Google search after this about the most popular letters in your language. And in the English language, the most popular letters are Itaewon Shridlu. And if you decide to go on Wheel of Fortune, you're welcome. I just helped you win. So Itaewon Shridlu are the 12 most popular letters in the English speaking alphabet. And so if you practice them, uppercase, lowercase, what you've done for yourself is that now you have improved almost half of the letters that you're going to write, half of the alphabet, almost half of the alphabet, because there's 26 letters and this is 12. And I would say 3/4 of the time, these are the letters you're going to write. So if you can get these right, you're more than halfway there. So this is a great way. These are great things to practice, these letters in any combination. If you have any kind of a Scramble app or anything like that, or a Word app, type these letters in and practice those letters. That's the first thing. Notice too that what's in this Itaewon Shridlu are all of the vowels. Vowels are very popular in the English language, not always popular in other languages that use more consonants. But now what I want you to think about is making, it's called a vowel challenge. So if I were to write out, actually, I'm going to write it in alphabetical order, A, E, I, O, U. Notice I spaced them way out. Can people unmute and tell me what is a challenge letter for you? What is a letter that you find challenging?
E.
You.
None of these. Give me a consonant. Sorry. What's a hard letter to write?
S.
Yeah. What's another one?
F.
F. What's another one?
K.
G.
G.
N.
I heard an N.
K.
Give me one more, just for fun.
Z.
M.
Z. Yep. And we have an N. So what we've done here is we haven't made a word. We'll just cross this one out, though there is safe in there. Gin. Okay. Okay. There's a couple of words in there. I've never seen that happen. So now what we can do is write out your vowels, write out your challenge letters, and now write them all out in a row in your handwriting, uppercase, lowercase, whatever. And what this is going to do is slow you down because you usually don't write these letters in this order. This is not something you usually write, right? You can do it in uppercase. And what it's going to make you do is focus on each letter individually because you've got to slow down because you have to look at what letters these are. And you are, again, practicing the most common letters, the vowels, and you're practicing the ones that you have challenges with. So again, this is another great way to practice some lettering. Now, I also say write words as soon as you can because that's going to help you with your spacing. So we're not really focused on spacing here, though you can do that. I'm also focused on form first and then spacing. Now, we talked about the mother letters, and if you are practicing italic or a lowercase lettering style, an in chain is a really great way to practice. So what is an in chain? An in chain is when you take the in, oops, I'm going to mess this up, and you write it. You don't have to change letters. I'm just doing this so that you can see it. And it's a little difficult because I'm changing the size of my tool, but you don't have to do this. What you can do is write an in between each letter that you write, because that in is your mother shape, and it has the branching here that's going to help you. What questions do you have? I know we have a lot of people unmuted. I'm wondering if any of you have questions.
I just have a comment. In calligraphy, we do that when you're learning a new script or hand to do spacing.
Exactly.
That's very familiar. Yeah, that does really help.
So this is called a challenge chain. This is called, I've called it an in chain. Does anybody else call it something different?
Just a letter chain.
Yep. Yep. Good. All right. And then finally, the final practice exercise that I have is going to be always write a pangram. Yeah, we have a question.
Yep. First of all, sorry, apologies, because
No
I
worries.
realized my microphone was not on mute, and I have a little challenging situation
Oh,
here.
no. All right.
But my question was about what I realized when I was doing the exercises is like the first capital letter combining it with the lowercase letters. I find that I'm having difficulty with letters like the F as a capital letter, and then like connecting it with the rest of my handwriting.
Okay. So the F tends to be pretty straight. What's your next letter? Can you give me an example?
Like an R.
Okay. And give me
But
another. Yeah.
The R tends to be like a script R, a cursive R. And then I saw with the E as well, I'll maybe change the form of the E depending on the.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
there
I,
work,
yeah.
but when I was doing it more of my handwriting, then it pops out at me as like it doesn't flow, it doesn't connect nicely.
Right. And so what I would say is now we have a whole nother way of practicing, and that's letter combinations. Right. And so if you have, you can actually do this with every letter of the alphabet if you literally did vowels, because again, practicing vowels is great. So if you went A, E, I, O, U, and then B, A, B, E. Notice that I wrote this vertically. I did this on purpose because it was easier for me than if I were to write it horizontally. Does anyone understand why?
Because of your starting letter?
Yes. Because when I wrote it like
Then
that,
they're
I
all
went
consistent.
ABC. Oh, wait, I'm doing vowels, right? If these are all the same, then what I can do, if I do them vertically, and you can write all your first letter, I wouldn't do that. I would write it A, and then the next letter, and then I would write it like A, I, A, O, A, U. I wouldn't write the first letters all at the same time. I apologize. I would do B, A, because I want to see how naturally they come together. And I'm going to notice that some letters have to be a little bit further apart. And I can look at these and go, whoa, those are really close together, but they live nicely in relationship to each other. But if I add another letter over here, like L would be easy. It's a little bit further apart. I add another A, I start to write other words with it. You can then add to it, right? Behance. Okay. But the idea here is give yourself enough room to see what happens. That got a little further away. That's fine. But start to notice how these letter combos work. So if F is a problem, then I would say write your letter F and your next letter. And if there's other letters that you need to practice it with, like the R or the L, start doing that and then write actual words next to it. Like go ahead and expand it out so that you can see, is this too close or does it need to be further apart? And that's just, this is something, again, there's so many letter combinations, but if you're having trouble with one letter as your first capital letter with a lowercase letter, then do this letter combo practice.
So for example, in that case, would it be, you know, just for, I think for the readability, or the, would it be okay to, for example, if the R goes to have the R as a script instead of a cursive?
So let me ask you, if you're doing your R as a script from here, what's the next letter?
That I was doing the frozen crystals pentagram.
Okay. So is the rest of it always script?
No, more cursive.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what I
like-
meant. Script in cursive or print. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So would you be open to changing your F so that it's a script F?
Yeah,
If everything's cursive, then should this be a cursive F?
Okay.
And then how do you write a cursive F?
That's, yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah. And that's different for everyone. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to be, you know, is it going to go like that? Is it going to go, you know, how are you going to do that? So that sounds like that's something that you're going to need to work out. And that might be for a specific word, right? This might not be, I'm always going to write it like this. It might be if I'm going to write a quote and I want to write frozen, then I might do it in an expressive way differently than how I usually do it. But that's a great question. You've got a good challenge here that you can focus on if it's important to you, right? And again, going back to those top 5 are going to be, and going in that order is going to help you prioritize. So if you're like, I just don't even know where to start because you learned so much today, going back to that top 5, your form first, knowing what it is you're going to write, what tool do I need to write it with? And maybe you want to choose the tool first, that's fine. But really it's about what is it that I want to write and what is that style or that form? Then the proportion, then the slope, then the baseline, and then the spacing. And the baseline and spacing can also kind of flip too, because baseline may or may not be important to you, but slope is important. And then the last thing is the pangram. So change up your pangrams. In that, if you go to pangramlove.com, at the bottom, you can download, I think it's 5 pages of winning pangrams that we came up for Pangram Day. Another thing I love to practice, and I love that we had a German pangram, and I love this big word. It's 20 letters long. German words are very long. So I practice German words because it's not my native language. So the lettering combinations are going to not, some of them are usual, but for the most part, they're not usual for me. So having a dictionary in a different language is a great resource as well. Good. So I am going to make a video that answers all of your questions that are in the chat. So I'll be sure to save that. You can also save the chat by clicking the 3 little dots at the bottom of your chat window to save the chat. But I'm curious, are there any new questions that have come up since we had the chat storm earlier that you're like, whoa, I'm going to need this answered before next week? So what questions do you have that have come up since this? And then we've got a few more tips here. Are these exercises listed anywhere? I think I don't know if I put them in the chat, but I will. Excellent question. And I'm going to add the new letter combination challenge because I think that was great. Okay. Feel free to unmute. If you have new questions. This time went really fast, didn't it? Or maybe not. Maybe it was very slow for you. I don't know. Yeah.
It went pretty fast, Heather.
What I love about lettering is it puts us in the now. It can put us in the
Yeah.
flow state. But what also happens is that we might either get too thinky and overthink it and maybe not write the letters that feel comfortable to us, or we might get so comfortable that we might lose focus or not really pay attention to what we're doing. And so there's a balance there, and making this time for ourselves is really important. So speaking of making time, what I want you to do, and I'll put this in the chat too, is I want you to schedule practice time on your calendar this week. So how much time does that need to be? Well, I would start with 5 to 10 minutes a day and see how much you can work up to without feeling bored, feeling rushed, or getting in pain. So I know that I saw someone in the chat said that your hands cramp up. If your hand is cramping up, then you can do a couple of things. You can do some hand exercises before you begin, some warm-ups. I like to do this with my tool because it helps me just know where my fingers are in relationship to it. If you have other types of either stretches, sometimes I like to do gentle things, hand yoga, where I'm just bending one knuckle at a time. If I'm too tense, and how do I know if I'm too tense? Well, if my jaw is clenching and my shoulders are up by my ears, that means I'm clenching too hard on my tool. And so my recommendation for that is go ahead and take your tool and try to crush it, like really try to break it. You probably won't. Try to break it and then loosen up to the point where it's almost about to fall out of your hand. Once you know that range, then you're going to go back to what feels comfortable. And that tension is because you were probably thinking too much or you had some anxiety around what you were writing. Okay. So 5 to 10 minutes, work your way up. If you're used to already practicing half an hour, hour, or longer a day, some of you do practice for longer than an hour a day, then you're good. You've got that practice time already built in. Focus on some of these exercises. I would ask you to date each page so that you have that. And then if you can, post your best page on Padlet before the next session. If you do 16 pages, do not post 16 pages. I don't have that kind of time. Post your best page or the page you want feedback on. When I say your best page, chances are you want that to be your new baseline and you want to go from there. And so I'll follow up with an email along with the recording in the next 24 hours where I'm going to give you the recording. You have these handouts, so you can go back and look at your notes. And you can, if you haven't done the pre-work, you can certainly go back and do the pre-work as well. All right. I know it's a lot to digest, and I have one more exercise after this. Not sure how we progress to finding our signature style. Right. That's why this class is here. And you've just gone about halfway through. This is the uphill climb. I've given you some tools. The signature style is going to come back in the next session. So you're not going to practice your signature style. You're practicing these exercises. I've broken them all apart, and then we're going to bring that all together in the next session. You're getting a little ahead, Joe. This is good, though. So I want you to start looking at the consistencies in your work. Build up the consistency and then start noticing what those are. Practice your chosen fonts based on templates or experiment with finding your own style. Again, I would say just practice these exercises in getting the consistency. You're looking at what do you normally do versus where you want to go. And so, but I'm going to trick you into finding that signature style in the next session. All right, lots to digest. Is this just your thinky brain? Yes. You're also trying to capture all of this notes and it's difficult. That's what the recording's for. Is there a better way to capture notes while digesting all of this? Yes. So keep it light. Don't try to boil the ocean. I would say if there's something that goes, ooh, ding, 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 that's new information, go ahead and write it down. But again, you've got the recording. Do I recommend on focusing on several different print fonts to analyze and modify your handwriting to help you find your own style, or should you concentrate on just one? Just one. The reason why I say that is because in the next session, I'm going to have you use a different tool. And the forms that you've created are now going to become the forms that you use a different tool with. Okay. So we just want to focus on one if you can. If you have the capacity to say, I can do lowercase, I feel like I mastered it. I can do uppercase, I feel like I mastered it. Now I'm going to do a script. If you have that capacity, go for it. But if you're like, this is all too overwhelming, do one thing. Okay, your connection has been unstable. I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, I will send the formatted chat. Great. I have one more session. Yes, I'm going to offer handouts for session 2. And when you're practicing the way we want to make our letters, the way a font is. I'm sorry. Okay. So the font that you printed out was just so you could see the mother shape. You have your own mother shape. Notice how different those are and where your mother shape starts to come together. How do all of your O's and N's start to looking like each other? Okay, so Francesca's asking about the chickens because I said that I had chickens in my script, and you're right, you were listening so carefully and I didn't mention chickens. Oh my gosh, and I've even forgotten where that was. I think it was when I was gonna answer this. So where that was gonna be was, can we all agree that Padlet is a private space just for us chickens? So there we go. And so the final thing is the learn, do, thank. So let me get outside of this and oops, that went wonky. All right. So what I want you to do is your last thing here, and you can start journaling about this. This is our learn, do, think. Reflecting on what you learned today. What are some of your key takeaways? And this is for those of you who might be taking too many notes. Maybe you've got something in there. If you just have a gut feeling like, oh, this is what I got from this. What's one thing you learned that you're going to use right away? I would love to know in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute. That helps me know. What are you going to do differently? Not what are you going to do, but what are you going to do differently as a result from what you've learned? Was there one letter that you're going to write differently? Is this a new way of thinking? Did you have to unlearn or relearn something, like unlearn a bad habit or relearn a new way to do something? Yeah, that practicing letter combos was a big one. Thank you for bringing that up. Whoever brought that up, that was good.
I think my takeaway is the questions you put about looking at your work. Does it work? Is it consistent? How does it conform? Those will kind of help me to look at my work in a different way. And I really like the exercise where you had to focus on what's already good.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay. So disclosure, I'm an appreciative inquiry facilitator. So
Yeah.
when we focus on problems, we just get more problems. When we focus on what we want, we get more of what we want. And some of you might be like, nah, don't work that way. That's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
If you want to focus on your challenge letters, go for it. But when we look at what's working, we can use what's working to help us get through those challenges. So glad to hear that that was helpful.
Yeah. And I do that. I'm kind of like an agile coach, scrum master. So I do those kinds of things with my teams, and they struggle with finding the things that go well.
Yeah.
But now I realize that sometimes I do that too.
Yes, absolutely. So in this instance, what we're doing is we're combining the physical form of a letter, and we're combining how we feel about it and our judgment as human beings as we're trying to make it. We're refining our hand-eye coordination. We're doing a lot of things all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else want to share what you've learned? What was a key takeaway and what will you do differently? Good. I'm loving
so
seeing
many things. There were so many things. Going back to the very beginning, the difference between legibility and readability was, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, practicing the letter combos, the challenges and the easy ones, I think was really good for me.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. I know it can be a bit of a paradigm shift. However, we are grown adults who have had a mark making tool in our hand since before we started making memories. So we have very strong muscle memory in the way that we've been doing things. And it's hard to look at our letters sometimes and not judge it with an adult mind and still have a learning mindset, right? A new, like a childlike mindset. Great. And then finally, what are you grateful for? What did you gain from this experience? This is also part of that positive way of saying, okay, let's celebrate what I've done today, because you've spent 2.5 hours focusing on your letters. So hopefully it wasn't too painful. Hopefully you'll come back next week. And that downhill curve, that downhill slide that we're going to go next week, it's going to feel really, really fast. And so practicing this week, getting these exercises down, getting the consistency down is going to help build the confidence when I show you some new exercises next week that are going to get you to that next piece. So I will give you the recording. The handouts may come maybe a day later, mainly because I do want you to keep focusing on what you've learned today. So happy to see what's in the chat. You can keep adding to it. I'm certainly going to save it myself. And good. Anything else? I'd love to hear a one-word checkout. So if you can either type or unmute and just say one word, how are you feeling? And anything, it's the right answer no matter what. Good.
Challenged.
Challenged. Okay. Have you felt challenged before?
Not in this way.
Okay. Have you felt challenged in ways you didn't feel comfortable in the past?
Oh, definitely.
Did you survive?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Whew.
And I don't mean challenged in a bad way. I had to pick one word. So I wanted
Yeah.
to say really challenged, but.
Great, great. Well, what I love about being challenged is in order to get to the flow state, we have to have equal amounts of challenge and skill level. And so if you're over challenged, you may feel anxiety. And if you're under challenged, you're going to feel lethargic, like I don't really care. And so when you find that perfect level of challenge and skill level, you can get into the flow state. Good. So if you ever feel too challenged, go back to what you know. Go ahead and sit back in that beanbag chair for a minute and be like, no, you know what? I think I can push myself a little more. Good, good. Anyone else? I see a lot of positive stuff. Anybody else need to work through something? All right. Well, good. Enjoy your handwriting. It will serve you well. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks all.